Hey everyone, welcome to the Remix Austin Meetup within Austin about Remix. Welcome. I've started recording the numbers. For the past 3 months, this is our largest one. So way to go, people showing up. We have two super duper cool talks. Let's get that today. We have a talk about handling file uploads with Remix by Erwins. Very excited about, new speaker. And then also powering full stack JavaScript, Drizzle, Prisma, and the new Wave of ORMs by Jacob Wolf. Fun fact about Jacob, he has really long talk titles, but that's great.
I was a journalist. I'm sorry.
I was like, I found it in like an email subject line. It was so
You did a good job.
And so yeah, I was like, anyway, it all worked out. A couple of little things about Remix, just random stuff that's going online. We're gonna talk a little bit about like Remix Austin, kind of at the end, and about our meetup and some fun stuff we have. So Mark's gonna handle that conversation. But I have one fun little piece of information. So who here has used this website before? ChatGPT, right? So as of today, ChatGPT is written in Remix. And I wrote that. I didn't do anything. So if anyone asks you who even uses Remix, you can say Shopify, you already can say that. But you can also say apparently OpenAI thinks that we're pretty good. So I won't tell you who they moved off of. You can figure that out on your own. Yeah, I think that's all I got. I'll do other stuff later. So we're gonna do the transition, which will take like, who knows how long, probably like 2 to 8 minutes, because the setup is amazing.
All right. So today, thought I would talk about file uploads, and just a show of hands, who has done file uploads in anything? PHP. Okay, so we've all done file uploads and running into like some of the issues, just trying to upload stuff from a browser. And I thought that I would talk about how I would handle that with Remix, because I wanted to build a blog, right? With forms and Remix, right? Remix tries to make sure that that's up there. Remix.
Right, if one cable that might be a little.
If it doesn't, don't worry about it. No, it's all right. I'll read it off for y'all. So, Remix tries to get us back to basics, right? Just plain old HTML forms, trying to get back to basics, like some of my old coworkers like to brag about. So there's some standard stuff that we do, right? We have the proper ink type. We have the type file. There's the attributes that we can add some validation, all of that good basic stuff that we get out of the box with our client. Right. So we have our form, and I'm going to demo all of this, because what would this be if we didn't have a demo? So we have just our standard forms, and with Remix, right? The moment that we submit our forms, we normally want to get that form data. And with Remix, it's a little different, because when you add that ink type onto the form, it'll just blow up on you, right? So you might be wondering, what do I do next? And the documentation is helpful a little bit, but it's a little sparse, right? So the moment you do this request form data, right, you'll get this error, and we'll have to change how Remix parses that data and then hands us that information. So one of the reasons that I was inspired to do this talk is because I like to be on the edge, but I don't like to be so much on the edge that I push something to production that has the word unstable in it, right? And so, of course, my blog isn't used by or seen by much people, but still, the last thing I want is for it to blow up. So I dug deep into it, and I looked at this unstable parse multi-part form data, and it works well, but I found a couple of issues that occur when you use that API. So the first issue is that when you upload a file, all of that is just buffered in memory, which is fine for my tiny little blog, right? With just me uploading one photo per post. But if you were handling much larger files or things of that nature, that would become a bottleneck. And of course, you could run into issues if you had some concurrency or concurrent users, right? Again, that scary word, unstable, right? I tend to try to stay away from unstable APIs, right? Or things that could change. And another thing that I found out, the hard way is that you don't have access to the form data, right? So by the time that you use this unstable parse multi-part form data, that file's uploaded. It's done, right? There's a function that you pass into it, which is your handler. And by the time it runs that function, right, everything's done, that function's run, and then you can access your data. So if you had something like, I want to change the file name before I upload it, you wouldn't be able to do that. Or you do something really, really tricky to upload the file and then afterwards update the name. I didn't want to do that. So Michael Jackson to the rescue, right? Of course, I think we all know who M. Jackson is, right? He was the co-creator of Remix. And he has a little package. He actually has several packages. This guy's a savior. But he has literally a drop-in replacement for request.form data that I actually encourage y'all to use, even if you don't use the file stuff, because it's literally drop-in. You can have it and be consistent across your code base, and it'll allow you to do the same things you do when you await request form data and do your object.from entries. Except you don't have to do all of that. And I'll demo that a little bit later. But like it says here, right, for form types that are not the multi-part form data, it'll fall back to just the normal request form data. And performance-wise, it doesn't buffer any content, which is the greatest part, right? So you're not going to be using up memory while you're just trying to upload these files, right? And I put that link there in case anyone wanted to check it out a little later. So let's say you've gotten this, right? We are parsing our form data. We've uploaded it. We have the file, and we probably want to upload it somewhere. Again, what we would have done before is use that unstable upload file handler, or specifically use the upload file. There's two of them. One's in memory and one's an actual local file-based handler. So you could do different things with it, right? You can use a Cloudinary type thing that automatically shoots it up to Cloudinary, or use an S3, but I want to keep it simple for my blog and just do everything locally. But so in that vein, I used M. Jackson's package called file storage. And here's my thought process. If you look at the README on that GitHub, right? Locally, you get stuff done, you test it, make sure everything works. What you can do is provide an interface or implement the interface that the package provides and create your own custom backend. If you look at the Remix docs, you'll see where you can do the Cloudinary thing, but again, it uploads automatically, right? You can't really finagle it as much as you'd want. Using this package, right, you can kind of hook into those life cycle. You can hook into different moments when you're uploading it, but also if you want to delete or retrieve, all of these methods are available to you. And it's really just a really, really easy API to use. So I have nothing but praise for this package. File storage. So here, what I'm going to demo for you guys is just how I'm able to get that file, right, from the package before, right, from that parse form data parser. We have this file, we're able to upload it wherever we want, right? And then once we've uploaded our files, right, at some point, you probably want to let people view it or share it or whatnot. Of course, if this is just a resource, right, it's the actual static string, you could store it in a database and just, render it along with, your post or whatever fancy web thing that you're building. I wanted to look into resource routes because that's not something that I use a lot. And so with the resource, right, you need some sort of identifier to be able to retrieve the resource, right? And that's where that file storage package came in really handy, because what it does is it uses a key to more or less associate with your files. And of course, if you're doing your own custom thing, you have to work around that. But because we're using file storage, right, and I'm doing everything locally, all I have to do is get the name or parse the name from the URL, and pass it into the file storage and tell it to retrieve my file by that key and send a response with that text. And it's just magic. Internally, I do believe the file storage package uses yet another package that M. Jackson created, which is called Lazy File. Beautiful package. And underneath the hood, it streams everything by default. So again, you don't have to worry about memory issues. So I love that about it. Of course, you could always just do use the node built-in file system stuff. But again, if you do that, you probably want to stream it. So I thought that instead of just talking about this, I wrote a little bit of code, and I also wanted to show off my cat. So yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and just start this up. So this is just a really basic remix server, and Spark right here. And I wanted to show the regular way of doing file uploads, as if you were looking at the documentation, and then the more condensed M. Jackson style, right? Thriller style, I should say, right? You should trademark that. So let's see. So if we're doing the regular thing here, then let me actually show this. It's just a little UI. You click on the thing, upload picture, right? That's just our basic form. So, right, so I want to point out a few things here. We have our ink type, which we have to have. I'll also demonstrate how that blows up if you don't, if you just try to use a wait request form data. It's just a regular form. We have our labels, we have our input, nothing fancy. We have our type file. I literally just copy paste that from Tailwind UI. So it's very simple. All right, so we have our form here. And before I do this here, I'm just going to show you where to do. We were to submit. I should have showed you that it was working before I showed you it blowing up, right? If we just come here, we try to upload this. Well, that's what I get for trying to live code. I'm sure I'm handling my errors, but what you will see is that it'll show you that that fetch will have failed. I'm actually redirecting and I'm not, which is why you're not seeing that, because I made the error happen and then I fixed it. But trust me, if you don't redirect, you'll actually get an error and you'll see it all on there. See that right down here. So let me uncomment this out. So you'll see this unstable parse multi-port form data. It takes in your request and then it has this upload handler. Again, Remix gives you two handlers out of the box. You got the in-memory, which is what I'm using here, and just keeping it simple. And then there's that file-based, which will actually put it in a directory for you. And again, right, this function, of course, Remix creates this function for you. You could create your own, but it handles those file uploads immediately. There's no step in between. You get your form data afterwards, and then you can update the file name or update how you're storing that. Here, right, so here I'm doing form data to get how we pick. I'm using some invariants here just to make TypeScript happy. I am sanitizing the name. I just pulled a package off of NPM, probably has some vulnerabilities. But you probably do want to sanitize that name, make sure it's not, I can do anything weird, or if someone is uploading files, doesn't have anything crazy in there. And afterwards, I'm just redirecting to the actual file. Something else I did want to point out, because this is a resource route, when you are redirected to it, you don't actually see anything because of that loader. But if you refresh the page, you will see it. I think that might, if anyone knows, that might just be a quirk of Remix with resource route when you're trying to load them in the browser. But we're about to see it. So I'm going to show you the regular, and let's upload a different picture. That's Howie hiding from me when I'm trying to show him off, right? So you'll see here that we've been redirected. And of course, when I refresh, I think, again, just to quirk with Remix, the UI routes, and there's Howie. So the improved, which again, it's just a small improvement, but what I think is like these small little improvements over the course of an entire code base makes life simpler. And again, with doing some of the more custom stuff, this is where I think M. Jackson's packages really come in handy. So you'll see here we're using this parse form data, and if you're looking at this API, right, it's still the form data.get, but you can still I mean, this is how you retrieve your file, but it's not doing any of that uploading. It's not doing any of that, right? You get to work with your files in a more performant, more efficient way. Again, some invariants here. It's mostly the same thing. And again, I'm using that storage, that file storage package that I was talking about. Again, nothing fancy here. It's just local file storage. If you implemented your own interface for this, for the file storage, you could do your own things on how you want to upload or retrieve, delete, etc. And then we're redirecting. So it doesn't look that much different, but if I had started with this versus the other one, I would have been done with this and we wouldn't have to talk, right? So let's go back to the regular page here, proof file uploads. Load a picture of, oh no. Oh, I know what that occurred. I didn't upload a picture. Should probably add some validation to y'all. All right. And when we refresh, we do see that image there. All right. So again, this is just I think a little bit more than the basics. Just if you really wanted to get up and running very quickly with file uploads and remix, using M. Jackson's packages, I think is really the no-brainer, at least until they remove some of those unstable APIs. And even if you do choose to use those APIs when they are stable, keep in mind that there are performance things to keep in mind, especially with those large file sizes stuff, which is why, again, I recommend using his packages. So questions?
Do you want to pick that up where it doesn't show up immediately?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Change redirect to redirect document.
Okay.
It's trying to do a client-side navigation, but it's technically not React.
Okay. That's
I'm not 5% sure this will.
all right.
There. Oh, you.
Yeah,
It's not-
that's all right. That's me bribing Howie to come out. Yes, sir.
Other than my questions about Howie, does MJ's packages support multiple file uploads?
So
Concurrent files?
that's a great question. I believe that it would and it will. However, the way that you retrieve those, because I believe when you send multiple files, it kind of appends them into an array, like a file array list, if I remember correctly. You'd have to change how you iterate over it and then process it, right? Because with his API, you're just doing form data.get. I guess if we have time, we could just do a quick little test. I haven't, hit my quota of, live coding mistakes yet. So,
Yeah.
multiple, right? And I wish I knew how to put a little debugger here for Z. Figure it out. But if we come back here and where my be improved.
Most right on the input itself. Right, Jill?
That's the engineering manager.
Is that not letting you?
It's not letting me pick more than two, which it should. Let's see here. MDN to the rescue, right? But yeah, I do think that it would. Yeah, right. Yeah, there's multiple on the info.
Go back. Yeah. But it's not the type is different. That's for like a type detail.
Oh, and for email, yeah, file puts it. Well, we're not gonna leave today until I figure that out.
But probably not a constraint of the package.
No, I don't believe so. I think he would have thought it out.
Yeah.
He has all the heads. He would have thought it out. Any other questions?
All right, cool.
Oh,
You can try something for me. Did you make the redirect document instead of a return a throw? Does that fix the bug?
if we change redirect document to.
So returning it, you throw it.
Okay.
The thing that we do is, so you do like use action data, right? Type of action. So anytime we return a response, whether it's like throwing a 404, we always throw the response so it doesn't interfere with the type definition of action data.
Yeah, okay. Could have been on the wrong route, y'all, because I am hitting this right now.
Oh, it was regular versus improved.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Oh.
Well, all the things got fixed. That's amazing.
Now, I do think because I'm not handling that, I would have some questions that it probably didn't get the second file. I would have some doubts about whether that second
They may
file.
have just grabbed the first one in the array. Yeah.
Yeah,
That makes
so
sense.
that's the only like. Be cautious, you're allowed. Don't do what I did. Kids. Thanks for that. So throwing instead of just returning. Yeah, I like that. Any other questions? Well, I wanted to give a little bit of thanks to M. Jackson, of course, because those packages, I don't think they're touted or anything, but they're pretty solid packages, which I think should be brought in. And I wanted to thank Kat for being amicable and stuff, and for y'all for listening.
So, show of hands, how many of you people have used ORMs before? Decent crowd. How many of y'all have used other languages that has an opinionated ORM before, like Rails or Django? Cool. So hopefully this is not super foreign, but I did realize when we were working, when I was here last time, that Drizzle and Prisma are still relatively new. So wanted to come and give a talk about these. So first, a little bit about myself. I spoke 2 months ago. So for the all that are returning, maybe you know who I am, or the groups that worked with me on the radio game last month. My name is Saget. I'm a solutions engineer at Beehive. Beehive is a newsletter platform, competitor to Substack and MailChimp and a bunch of the others. So as solutions engineer, generally that tends to be a sales title. And mine is in some ways, but I'm sort of half product and half sales. So in Beehive, as for y'all that weren't here 2 months ago, we are built on Ruby on Rails backend and a React front end that is React Router. So as I was saying, yeah, at my day job, we use Rails on the backend and React on the front end. Use JBuilder to do a lot of the DSL building, where you build the JSON that goes to the React front end and the communication between the two. And as many of you guys know, or at least the ones that raised their hands about using ORMs before, Rails has an ORM called Active Record that is extremely opinionated, and personally, I actually quite like it. It's very straightforward to use. It makes using SQL, I think, really easy. And I wanted to talk about what the JavaScript world is doing around ORMs, because I think in many ways they're trying to follow in those footsteps. So what is an ORM? ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. It is essentially, if you have SQL, you've written SQL before, you'll know that you have foreign keys on tables here and there. So when, maybe you have a email addresses table, and that email address table contains an email column. It contains maybe the day that you verified that email, if you used another third-party service to do email verification, created at, updated at, etc. And then you have a users table, and on that users table, you have an email address ID. So that is your foreign key that references to your other table and links them together. ORMs generally are being able to reference on one another very, very easily. And so in Rails, and then I'll show you here in a minute, Drizzle, in Rails, you can do something like in that instance, you can do user.email address, and that will get you their email address and that entire object that comes with it. It will take the entire SQL selection in that case and bring back and send back that email address object. And all its columns if you want it, or just the columns you need if you don't want it, by doing a filter. And so essentially you're able to build these relations in two different parts, two different pieces of data in real time without having to do a bunch of inner joins or left joins or whatever your various different join is to get them. It does all of that in code immediately. And so there were many ORMs before JS. It's generally a new concept to JavaScript. I put a few of them up here, Django being one of the more Python ones. Django has a ORM built into the Python framework. The Ruby has Rails, and Rails has Active Record, which is their ORM, and Laravel also has their own ORM as well. Anybody notice anything with the three things here in common?
JavaScript.
They're all frameworks, every single one of them. They have a very specific way that you do things, and they're all highly opinionated. The ORMs that exist in these three things, though there are alternatives in those languages, the ORMs that exist in all of these only work in the context of these frameworks. And so if you want to use Active Record, you're not using it outside of Rails, even if it's just another Ruby application. If you want to use the Laravel ORM, you're using it in the context of Laravel. And so I think a lot of the people in the two, specifically the two ORMs that I'm going to talk about today in JavaScript, wanted to break that. They wanted you to be able to do it the way that you wanted to do it. There's a great podcast, I can link it in the Discord group later, with on syntax, where the guys that made Drizzle talked about this. They want you to be able to have the flexibility of how you want to use SQL and how you want to obtain your data inside of your code, regardless of whether or not you're writing in Remix or Next.js or Astro. It doesn't matter. If it's JavaScript, it works. And so how do ORMs improve the developer experience? So I wrote basically the same thing, one in SQL and one in SQL and one in Drizzle. So on the left here, if you've written SQL before, that probably looks pretty familiar. I ran this in Neon, which is just like a Postgres driver, database driver that you just insert. If you've not written SQL, but you've written GraphQL, that probably also looks familiar because I was talking to Brooks, nobody has made anything like this for GraphQL before. So GraphQL still writes like this if you're running GraphQL queries inside of JavaScript, which is really annoying. But essentially you are writing SQL inside of a string, and then you call your SQL client to process that SQL. And what don't you have there? You don't have type safety at all. So if you are a TypeScript user, you have no way to know if any of the things you are doing, especially when you start doing, that's a select, but if you start doing inserts or anything else, if you match your types. So you don't know if, hey, I'm trying to insert a UUID into an ID column that's actually an integer. Cool, that's gonna break when you try to run that. One of the nicest things about Drizzle in particular, and I swear they don't pay me, they don't pay really anybody, they're mostly an open source project, is that all of this here on the right side is type safe, every single bit of it. So I'm going to show some code examples in a minute. And when you hover the selects and you start hovering over your models itself, so from posts and users, it will show you every single type on that model in the IntelliSense immediately. So you can know, and it will error. So if you try to insert a UUID into an integer column, you're going to get an error really early in your code, and it's going to make your code file red before you even run it. And so that's perfect. You don't have to rely on a random SQL error that may be confusing. You actually get it straight into the code itself. So I did put together some various different code demo for this. I wrote what is essentially these queries, and I guess I will full screen and dual these. Is there a way that I can minimize? Yeah, okay, let's get that up. Now, if I go and show you guys structure SQL there and schema here. Okay, so right side is how you create these tables in SQL. This is very traditional standard SQL, Postgres in this case, and good luck if you're working in Postgres or in Columnar or whatever, remembering every single type of column. I certainly don't remember all of them and frequently look at the Postgres docs regularly. The nice thing about Drizzle in this case, which is the left-hand side of this, is that every single one of them is an import. And so if you start writing something, then you will know that you have to have what type of stamp, or you want a timestamp. Cool, it's just timestamp. If you want a UUID, it's UUID, and they're all packages. If you try to insert one that needs something different, generally, if you have, I use Cursor, but if you use any of the copilots, they know this, so they write it really fast, and they autocomplete really, really well. And so then you build the tables exactly like this, and I'll show you guys what it looks like to build the client, because there's another part of Drizzle called Drizzle Kit that essentially has the ability to do two different things. So there are two different packages. There's Drizzle, which is what you're using in your code files itself, the ORM. And there's Drizzle Kit, which takes this file, the exact same file you've written to give basically the object schema, and it will take and can do two things. It can push to your database with a CLI command, or it can introspect your database. So say you already have a database set up somewhere else, you already have schemas, all of these various different schemas set up in something like Supabase, or and it works with MySQL, Postgres, and SQLite. So you can use it with any of the three major SQL databases. You can do an introspect command, and it will take the schema for those tables and create these types instantly, like that, which is really, really neat. And so you have the ability to push this up, and I want to push it up here in a second after I go over some things. And so this is what it looks like to build these schemas. And then when you come to the bottom, this is a very also common thing. Frankly, I actually like how Rails does this better than Drizzle, but then that's fine, is defining relations. So Drizzle has relations. So this is how you can do this one of two ways. So if you have just one for one, right? So for example, here, a user at any given time is only going to have one email address ID, right? I did it in this way. So in the event that they wanted to change their email, we have an entire table that is all email addresses. And so even if they change it, we keep the email address, but we just change what that ID is in the reference. So a user can only have at any given time one email address. So you just do this, you just do references, email address. But in this case, for example, I have posts and I have tags, and a post can have many tags. And so this is how you define that relation, is you do relation post many, and then tags many tags. That's it. Now you have the ability to have many multiple tags, which I will show come in handy in a minute. So if we go over to the methods of how to use Drizzle, I personally find Drizzle to be, and Prisma to a lesser extent, but I'll talk about performance in a second. I find them to really help developer experience. When you hover over, say, users, there's your types. Did any of you guys see me do an export type or an export interface anywhere? No, that is inferred because of Drizzle, because I deferred the schema. I made the schema over here for users. This is essentially a type. Very similar to Zod, which also does work with this if you're a Zod fan, which I am. But now you have all your types, and if I start trying to insert something that doesn't match the type, for example, if I were to go and do in this insertion, we know that username has to be a string based off of here because we've made it a text column in Postgres. If we go back over here and we go and do username is now a object, a type error, because it knows that username has to be a string 100% of the time. And so that was the driving motivator behind, or the driving motivation behind Drizzle in particular, was to make type safe SQL and do it in such a way that it's really, really tricky like this. Go ahead.
Do you want me to save questions for the end, or you mind if I?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So one of the things that I found difficult in Prisma was doing kind of like partial types and defining those. Like for instance, if you had a select statement that brought back only part of a user, could you save that type somehow and pass it around your application?
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say personally, I got into Drizzle a little bit after Prisma had been out. So Prisma first shipped to production in 2021. So these are all relatively new. I think Drizzle stabled in 2022, but then they also completely rebuilt their API last year. So, and one of the things, though I don't have an example up here, I can show it in the docs. You can actually write raw SQL in here if you want to. They have a SQL function, which you see me use a little bit here because there are some limitations around counting and other things. Oh, I want the comment count. Cool. I am looking specifically to do count like you would do in SQL. So I call the SQL operator. In theory, you could use the SQL operator and do the entire selection in SQL. So if you're more comfortable in SQL, you can just do raw SQL. That's what floats your boat. But you could also do the ORM side of things. But yes, to answer your question, you can do partial types as well, because it defines basically all of these as object schemas. Very similar to Zod if you use Zod.
So do you have to construct your own partial types? Because the way Prisma does it is like, you tell us the query you ran, and we could put that in a type definition and create a type for you, rather than saying, oh, I want the type of the user, pick these things.
How do you mean? Like, give me an example of how it would work that way.
So Prisma uses open and close, greater than, less than signs. You could stick your query in there and it'll infer the type from it, and then you could save that rather than using the type of your user full response and then picking or omitting from that.
Okay, so yeah, this does do that by default, to answer your question. So, and they even have, so one of the things that they sort of limit you to, so if you see in this example, I'm importing these various different calls directly from Drizzle. That is one of the reasons they do that too. It's because these are type safe. You're not going to call, there's like a GTE in here, greater than or equal to, right? Is a GTE. You're not calling GTE on strings, and it's going to start throwing if you call GTE on a string column, right? Because that's a number function. It's going to want number over number. And so, yeah, I find Drizzle to be pretty robust in type safety front and back, and the ability to use it. And they also do have support for if you wanted to get into maybe you had a form, and when somebody fills out the form, you want to store that to a database table. There is the ability to use Zod and to infer from this. So if I went over to Drizzle's documentation here, this is literally that is one line and you have built a schema. So for Zod, so you import from Zod, and then this is your create insert schema. And you can refine the fields to your question if you wanted to start tinkering what they would, if you wanted to do something to them before they came in, you could do that in a function. If you wanted to change what the allowed value is, maybe you wanted to use Zod's, even though it's text in Postgres, maybe you only want it to be a URL. So you want to change that type, right? You want that to be z.string.url because that's going to limit it only to URLs that also have HTTPS or HTTP. So cool, you want to do that. Postgres is not going to know how to do that, really. Some databases are smart enough to be able to refine strings. But if you wanted to do that in Zod and you wanted to make a Zod schema, you could do this, which is that highlight right there. So you could change it and be like, okay, now URL has to be z.string.url, which is really neat. But yeah, I mean, it's as easy as this. Just literally creating a Zod schema, and there you go. I love Zod. I think it throws better errors. If you've never used Zod, I recommend you use it. It throws really nice errors on very specific things. So it's rather than some crazy weird type error that doesn't make any sense and trying to read it when on your output or your build output, or when an API request comes in or a form or whatever, it will specifically throw an error that you can define, and it will tell you exactly where it is. And then also, you can also send those errors back to the user itself. So I recently built a form for beehive.com. I used Zod. We had previously not used Zod on the site before. And I used Zod because it was, hey, we want you to use a specific type of email. You can't use a personal email. So we did an exclusion of, the common ones, Gmail, Hotmail, whatever. And then Zod is doing all that parsing, making sure that it meets the criteria, and then it throws back the error that you define it inside of the Zod function. Just really neat. What is I think it's clear, at least to me, but open to questions of what the developer experience enhancement is. If you don't know SQL, the way I think about Drizzle, and I think they've actually said this before too, is that if you do know SQL, you know Drizzle, because it is, look, we're using db.select, db, from, etc. So if you've written the types of stuff that I've written over here in the Neon example, you're going to be really close and very, it's going to be very familiar to you. However, if you have not used SQL before, I find this to be a lot easier as well, because it's your first time working and manipulating with data on a database, with some caveats, which I wanted to put in here. So one of the things that I've noticed a lot of people do when they start using ORMs, especially Drizzle and Prisma, is that they do individual selects. I've seen a lot of stuff on GitHub when I was looking around for stuff like this, which is inside of a loop function. Say you have an array, you're doing one select for each loop rather than the more traditional SQL thing. Like maybe you're trying to check, where inside of an array of strings, maybe you would be trying to think of an example. Today at work, for example, I had a list of IPs and I was trying to find every single event that matched those IP addresses, right? So I have in SQL, I have an array of IPs, and then I call the int function, right, in SQL, and that is checking against where in is checking IP is in, or IP in this. A lot of the time, some of the code I've seen online does this, where it is selecting individuals. So it's like for each person that's in this array, select, 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 select. That's how you get really bad performance issues with Drizzle, is doing that rather than doing an array and then trying to figure out what the breakdown is. What you should do is more like this. So then you select your post with all your conditions, whatever pieces you want. Don't do select star, please, for the love of God. But this is, for example, trying to find like what are popular posts. So I want their title, I want their username, and how I'm classifying them as popular is what the number of comments that they have is on them. And so then this creates an array within itself, which, by the way, is type safe out the box. So it knows that this is going to be an array at the end. So then if I start to go use popular posts somewhere else within my function or within anything, for example, if I go over to a JSX file, then this is typed already. So I know that this use state, I did it in JSX to avoid trying to set up a TSX file or a TSX and React TypeScript file this morning. But this is use state and it's an array. So then you just do all your array functions. And then if I wanted to show you guys how to do the setup around DrizzleKit, hopefully it plays nice with me. Super based. Same toolbar is killing me. Sorry.
You hit the mute button on the toolbar on the left.
Thank you. This is the project I was working on last time. Now, if I make new, all right, all projects, new project, Jacobs org, the remix, Drizzle demo. That forced me to generate a password. Cool. Let's delete this anyway. Steal the API key. Got it. All right, cool. So we have our action URL here, I believe. No, that's not action URL. There is. Don't want to pull it. Just need to do it. Because it's still setting up. Yeah. Okay. When this finishes setting up, I'll show you what it is like to actually do inserts. Oh, wait. Any other questions on this?
I played with Drizzle, and one of the things I really like is it has Drizzle Studio, which is more like I don't know if you guys use Table Plus or DB, DB,
Yeah.
right? But it has a lot of that built into it. So if you really want to get up and running quickly, Drizzle's great.
Yeah, and they are integrating into a lot of places too, natively. So one of the places that has more recently used Drizzle that you wouldn't know because it's an open source project, though I think the team makes some donations to them because the Drizzle team is fully open source and not really a full form company, is that Astro. I'm a big proponent of Astro back at the sticker here. Astro uses SQLite and they use Drizzle as their, like they released Astro DB, I think late last year or early this year, and it's Drizzle under the hood. So if you ever start an Astro project and you wanted to start just doing DB inserts or DB selections and like create everything natively in Astro out the box to the point of very opinionated of how you do things, that is Drizzle under the hood. All right, so now if we go pull my Postgres connection string, and we set it here. What was the? I made a mistake and should have copied that. And that password. Location. Anybody know we're on Superbase quickly to reset the password? I made the mistake of not saving. Or restart a little bit. Sure. Hell, I'll just make it up. Remix, Drizzle, demo 2. All right, now I'm going to save it. Don't care where it goes. Go on there for a second. All right, cool. Oh no, did not save it. Oh my God. No, I think 1Password actually will give it to me historically. If I go to. Where is that?
Playing a dangerous game, Jacob.
Oh, I know. Not recently deleted. I'm gonna have to make a third one because it didn't copy the right thing again. Sure. The worst demo ever, I know. All right. Please. They don't let me do. All right. There we go. That's what I want. Sick. I'll go delete the other two. Okay. Project settings. To delete. Remix. All right, cool. Oh, it's because false.
Well, they used for it, and you could be like,
So you can hear what I thought broke. I was like, which one makes it lets me do this really fast? Not this one, sure.
They can't account for people not remembering their password.
That's true. I'm sure there's a way. Cool. Where's all demo?
She double tapped that and keep it also.
Okay, now we're gonna face this.
Because I was like give me hooks.
Yeah, that's like the main. Yeah.
All right, well,
use case.
boys, you guys want this comes like
I actually have to look at set up the appropriate one too. Oh, I'm missing the. Just there's a little. So I'd never run the Drizzle config.
it's like spot. It's like super.
Oh, I see.
And so they tell you all the things like you're. I don't actually use the paid version. That break has like a boss.
Drizzle,
So yeah.
schema.ts.
Good spot.
I use Spotlight. I don't have any. Yes. Spot and search term.
All right. We're almost there. Almost. Okay. Now I won't crash too while we get the lovely redo. Okay. All right. So now if you do drizzle kit migrate using default oops, should be a JSON, not a JavaScript file. Anything. Should be a JavaScript file. Specify properties. I literally did this for a radio game, and it's just every time I forget what the drizzle kit migration there is. Postgres and Postgres. B credentials, that's what it is. They only have no properties. Oh, you want these? Or tell, there we go, magic. All right, now I believe if we run drizzle kit migrate. Drizzle kit generate, that's right. Drizzle kit generate. No, it doesn't exist. Drizzle config, yes. That's ORM demo. And all of it. I get it. I'm so confused though. It's saying that it doesn't exist, but it literally exists here.
Is that in the examples folder? In Warp, it looks like you're in the ORM demo.
Oh, you're right. Good call. There we go. Drizzle kit generate. I thought I had started at the top, but it did not start at the top. All right. So now if we run drizzle kit migrate. So what it does when it runs migrate is that it actually does create the SQL file that you saw I created earlier. So it takes all of your schema types and then it throws them in there and say if you make a change to the schema file later down the road, then you can let's say we add a new column. Let's go ahead and push this first. So drizzle kit push.
The password. Our republics.
Hold on. That's me. I bet it will do that. Nope. I know. No config path. Yeah. I don't know what that error is though, because it seems like it's
Drizzle
kind of model.
itself.
Yeah, I know.
Is that file saved?
Yeah, it is.
Schema.ts?
I was trying to do lowercase though.
Read. Okay. Ah, surgery is about to. This tab. It's loading the speech. It's filed on. So it's.
All right, well, I'm not gonna waste your time on this. I literally ran this last week. I don't know why it's not running. But this also seems like it's a node models problem, so.
Walk us through what it does.
What it's supposed to do is it's supposed to take this entire SQL file and it will push it for you. And so you can do the opposite too. So like I was saying, if you had the DrizzleKit package, so Drizzle and DrizzleKit are different. DrizzleKit is being able to do migrations basically inside of the app. Whereas Drizzle is actually the ORM that is using your various different, all your various different queries and powering your different queries in real time. And so this is essentially being able to, in DrizzleKit, it is supposed to take this SQL file and push it to Supabase for me in real time using that connection string. And then in the inverse, and then if I do migrations, I can generate those migrations. So if I were to go, I know this will work without this being a problem, but if I were to go into the schema and now I wanted to add, for example, a deleted at column to the to that, and then I went back and do DrizzleKit generate, and then do DrizzleKit migrate, it now creates another schema file where that migration is in. So that is done in real time. And then basically when you do DrizzleKit push, it pushes all your latest migrations, all the ones that haven't been sent to your database in real time. And then if for whatever reason you changed it on the database end rather than the ORM, you could do DrizzleKit introspect, and it will basically take the entire schema, read the schemas, and pull it down into a schema file and generate all the types. So that's what it's supposed to do, but I don't know why it's erroring on something that is in the node package.
We won't hold you personally responsible.
No, it's okay. Cool. Any other questions?
Anybody using Drizzle at scale? So things like how does it handle connection pooling or optimizing the generated SQL or that kind of thing?
I don't know too many people using either Prisma or Drizzle at, if you're talking about big scale, right? We're at HEB. If you were like building for HEB, I don't think. The one thing I was going to say that I forgot and that reminded me is that one of the problems with, I think, JavaScript ORMs generally is that JavaScript the language. It is not necessarily the ORM's fault. JavaScript is single threaded. Being able to parallelize it, I had this discussion with Brooks, but being able to parallelize JavaScript is nigh impossible, and you have to send it off into some worker like TriggerDev or ingest or something else, right? That handles background processes and runs multiple jobs at the same time. I don't think any big company is going to do that at scale when you could just use Go, which doesn't really have a great ORM at the moment, or you could use Rails and you could just scale up your dynos and then spin, have all those dynos doing them and then have them in different files, controllers, services, whatever. So they run it at the same time. So I haven't met anyone that is using Drizzle at like massive scale. But a part of the reason I wanted to give this talk is because I think more and more people are trying to build JavaScript backends, especially, younger companies. Like, for example, at Beehive, we just acquired a company called TypeDream that is a drag and drop website builder. All of their stuff was Next.js. So they're in the process of rebuilding it right now in the context of Rails with some of our existing stuff, Rails backend, React front end. But they built their entire company for, I think, 2 years or so while it was running, all in Next.js. So they were using, I don't think they were using Drizzle specifically, but they were using Next.js and SQL in the back with and having it do all that processing. If I was an engineering manager and I knew I was like managing a app that has millions of users, I'm not really positive that I would use a JavaScript backend with an ORM generally. I think that Drizzle, one of the things Drizzle has done separately than Prisma before it, is Drizzle's done a lot of performance optimization because they try to do as much of this in raw SQL as possible, right? So they're abstracting the SQL and making these SQL types safe and inferring types. What they aren't doing is they aren't trying to bring in all of your SQL information when you fetch it into memory and then process it, which is a lot of what Prisma does. So Prisma is actually taking that information, pulling from SQL, doing the processing in memory, right? People don't do that in the other languages either. You don't do that in Rails generally. You try to keep that. If you're doing SQL processing, you do the processing in the SQL because it's meant to do that, handle, millions, billions of rows of data. And so I don't think, I love doing this. I'm working on a project right now in Astro that I'm using Drizzle because like the volume is totally fine. I think we're going to be writing maybe like 300,000 records a month because we're like writing on every single visit and some of the other stuff. It's a new site, so every time a visit comes in, we're taking like context object from Netlify and writing like where they came from, like what their postcode is, etc. And that's all using Drizzle to do that writing. But if like we were talking billions of hits and really high traffic, I don't know how well that holds up. And that's a JavaScript problem, not necessarily a Drizzle problem.
Yeah, maybe there's a creative way to use some of the serverless stuff, Lambdas or Cloudflare workers or et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and so that is one of the nice things that I didn't have the opportunity to like really demo and show, and spinning up serverless functions kind of a pain in the butt sometimes anyway. However, one of the nice things about Drizzle, if you look at their docs, is that because they don't have an allegiance to one of the three database types, they recently started working with or built stuff around Neon. Neon is also another Postgres SQL service. But Neon also, one of the things they did here is because Drizzle lets you build or choose your driver for connecting to your database. They have 10 examples here, 8 examples here just on how to do Postgres alone. They don't care like how you connect to your database. They aren't trying to tell you how to connect to your database. And Neon in particular, this was something that came out, I think about 7 or 8 months ago, because I started using it, serverless functions. It made a serverless driver that can connect to Postgres inside of serverless functions on boot. And so I wrote something at BI like very early in my time, I think in February or March, where we were like taking in some pieces of data, hitting another API, in that case, Rewardful, and then logging the responses and both the user responses and the API responses into a Postgres database on Retool. And that's what I used was Neon, because then I could parallelize it and I could spin it across for serverless functions and have each one. So even if that site, that Next.js site in that case, had a bunch of traffic coming in, each function was responsible for spinning up and doing that. And that is something that Neon innovated on, not necessarily Drizzle, but it works in that context too.
Yeah, and even on the left rail, it says usage with Cloudflare workers. And so if you've got a Remix app working in Cloudflare, you might get some of that concurrency.
Yeah, but I do think generally, I think performance for Drizzle is better than Prisma. Drizzle is not better than raw SQL. So if you went back over to my files and you went and hit like my Neon example where I would just do all the writing of the SQL itself, this is way faster than doing Drizzle generally, because it's raw SQL. The SQL is going to handle all the processing. You're just sending it the data to do the processing, right? You're offloading it. Drizzle is doing some type inference. It's making sure you're type safe, right? And everything else. And so with that does come a little bit of performance, a little bit of performance loss. But I think the trade-off is a really nice developer experience where like you can just go and hover in these methods. You can go and hover one of the models and boom, there is your infer type. And if you do the wrong thing, you're going to do the wrong, you're doing it and the file is going to light up red. So that is, I think, the trade-off for Drizzle generally is that it is
accurate.
Yeah, it's going to be really accurate, especially on the developer experience side. And if you're in a bigger company, I could imagine a world where and you, for whatever reason, we're building a full stack JavaScript app front and back, and you had developers that didn't necessarily know SQL like the back of their hand. This is a great way, I think, to be like, hey, here's some guardrails.
I think there are some small variations between different SQL databases, the DBMSs, and the fact that Drizzle relies directly on generated SQL. Would that pose a problem if we wanted to switch, for example, between Postgres and MySQL, or switch databases, as opposed to usual ORMs like Django, Active?
Yeah, so in theory, you could have like multiple Drizzle instances if you wanted to do that for some reason, and you did like the differences in JavaScript, right? You're right that so I use Postgres a lot. That's why I just spun up this in Postgres. But MySQL and SQLite in particular, SQLite is very different because it's so minimal, right? That it has far less types of data and far less types of columns.
So for testing, for instance.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's not Drizzle, and I've heard them say this, the founders of Drizzle say this, like they're not trying to tell you, hey, we're going to help you swap from Postgres to SQLite. Like that's on you. You got to figure out that data transfer. You could, though, using Drizzle, you could hook it up. You could have two instances of it where one is connected to Postgres and pulls the data. In the middle, there's JavaScript. JavaScript does the transformation of the data, and then the second one pushes it up to SQLite. You could do that. But I don't think that they are like trying to help you migrate from one to the other. I don't think any of the ORMs are, frankly, like all of them, you connect them to one type of database. That's it, basically.
Actually, one interesting thing about Django, for instance, this is the one I use. Like, since it's all ORM and it's all done in the code, you can have your test instance for your integration tests and stuff like that in SQLite, and the same code runs seamlessly with MySQL or Postgres. So the fact that you rely directly on the language instead of SQL gives you this flexibility.
Yeah, I know at work we use at Beehive we use Postgres for the bulk of our user data, and that's what we've used it for previously. Our events data is in ClickHouse, which is a columnar database, and so but uses MySQL syntax, for example, instead of Postgres. And so we've just ended up like Rails is not going to be able to do the telling difference, right, in Active Record. But what it is going to be able to do, and what we have done, is we've just written model methods that do all that insertion for them, right? So it's like you can write the MySQL syntax just like this, or just like the Neon example here, and then just pass in all the various different pieces of data.
Well, you handle the logic yourself. So.
Yeah, but Active Record also is not going to do that. And I find, at least as someone who works in Active Record every day at work, I find Drizzle to be very inspired by it. I find Prisma to be less inspired by it. I think Drizzle is a lot more similar to Active Record in many ways. And I actually think Active Record might be the best ORM. Like, yeah, I know a lot of people don't like Rails, but I find it to be really easy to use. Especially the fact that you can call relation on relation on relation like over and over and over again and nest down 3 ways. And all you have to do is add an ampersand. And like, if it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist, and it won't blow up your code, which is nice. But yeah, I think Drizzle has a way to go. I love using it. Again, I'm like building something. I'm building a new site in Astro at the moment, and it's great that like I can just write all my code in Node, on a Node backend server, and use Astro Actions with Drizzle, which they just released a stable where like you can call. It's basically TRPC, their version of TRPC, and I love that I can do all of the various different Drizzle things in that, and I don't have to like manage them on a repo by myself, which is a pain in the ass. So yeah.
Quickly, based on everything you said, is there any reason to use Prisma if Drizzle exists?
I don't think so. I think Prisma is getting better. I had used it a little bit before I first adopted Drizzle, and I actually found it like generally pretty hard to use. So like I was a journalist for a decade. That's sort of a side note. I was a developer. Like I grew up as a developer, or like learned how to be a developer as a kid, originally in OBC and then eventually in PHP. And then I went and did my journalism career, and then like 3 or 4 years ago, I started learning React. And one of the first like things that I started building full sites in was the T3 stack, Theo stack, and it used Prisma by default. And now you have the option to choose between the two. And I like, when I started working in Prisma, I like found it really annoying. Like it just didn't make a ton of logical sense to me. And the way that this does, that this is like really straightforward. And also like back when Copilot first came out, it started writing Prisma code in Drizzle projects, which is a pain in the ass because it's different syntax, because all it knew was Prisma at the time. But I think that Drizzle, and they've said this to the founders, like I think that they have pushed like JS ORMs forward, and Prisma is getting better with them.
Yeah.
But like they have a live demo of the two running the same code at the same time on their site, and this is like 10 times faster.
Yeah.
So I'm not paid by them, but I would endorse them over using Prisma personally. Any other questions?
Unrelated question. How was your experience using Cursor as an IDE?
Oh, I love Cursor. So maybe you guys, who all knows what Cursor is? This is a complete tangent. Cool. So Cursor is a It's an AI backed fork of VS Code. Differently than VS Code itself, it lets you choose your model. So you can use Cloud, which I do. Cloud 3.5 is the model I have set up here, or Claude 3.5 instead of using ChatGPT, which I personally find even GPT-4 is slightly out of date, or it gives you a method that's correct but not efficient, if that makes sense. So it gives you code that like, yes, it will work. Is it going to be the most efficient in a production context? And when I'm like writing massive code every day at work that's two different languages in Rails and React, right? Like, no, it is not going to give me the most, and it's not going to be able to read. Like when I first started working at VI, I used VS Code, and a colleague showed me Cursor, and that's what made me change. Like Copilot did not understand the thousands of files in that repository. The nice thing about Cursor is that it can index. So when you first open a repo for the first time and you go to ask it a question in the sidebar, it will be like performance will be better and answers will be more accurate if you index this. And it will take a while, but you can index entire repositories and it will read all of them and basically inform the model that, hey, this repository has this context. And so when you say, oh, I'm like looking for this, where this happens in a file, which, because unfortunately Rails, unlike TypeScript, you can, control click or command click a method and it will take you to the source of the method where it was exported. Don't do that in Rails. So it's kind of a pain in the ass sometimes if you just see a random method called somewhere and you're like, where did that come from? What file did that come from? So like when I was first learning our code base, I'd be like, hey, where is this? And it'd go and it would look at like 40 files and be like, oh, it's in this one. Here, go look. And so I find it to be a lot better of an experience, and like the autocomplete tends to be a lot more accurate too.
Cool. Dan? I don't know if you want to save this for after the recording or just the hallway talk, but at the very beginning of the presentation, you kind of talked about how JavaScript ORMs took a step to disassociate themselves with frameworks. And myself, and I feel like a bunch of other JS developers are sitting here going, why don't we have a Laravel? Why don't we have a tightly coupled ORM with a framework to give us those opinions in the JS ecosystem? Do you think it's a good thing, or do you know of anything that's promising that integrates an ORM with a framework?
I think they'd be mad. I think they'd be mad if I said this at a Remix event. I think that's what Next.js wants to be. Frankly, like I was saying earlier, like Next.js has an opinion on a lot of things, right? It has a specific way it does images, their thing. Has a specific way it does serverless functions, because it's vendor lock-in a little bit with Vercel, right? They lean you into Vercel's methods because it's made by Vercel. I think that Vercel has a commercial reason to make something similar to Laravel or Rails or or Django, where everything is very similar and it's in one ecosystem. I don't think they're working on an ORM at the moment, to my knowledge, and I know some people that worked at Vercel. I know that Astro, for example, is actually kind of trying to be that, but they're a fully open source project that's not connected to a hosting platform. So I think they're just trying to build stuff. But I talk to those guys pretty frequently, and yeah, AstroDB is SQLite and Drizzle, with some abstraction, but that's what it is, and they say that's what it is. But I think the motivations from the Astro team is because Astro is a framework, if you guys aren't familiar, and I'm happy to talk about it as someone who's building a bunch of stuff and also working on some open source stuff that's Astro related. Astro is trying to get people to use less JavaScript, actually. You can use React, you can use Svelte, you can use Solid in the context of Astro. And if the component doesn't have state or something that's interactive, on compile, when it builds, it will try to minimize the amount of JavaScript at the end. So it will build down as much of that into HTML and CSS as possible, which is why it's so fast and performant. And that's why I like Astro, because I build news related stuff. So it's, SEO speed is really important. Lighthouse scores are really important to get, indexed on Google. My general opinion is I like that the JavaScript ecosystem is so open. And I like that there is no right answer to everything. And that Erwins can go find a package that he likes how to do file uploads, and then someone can go do upload things separately. And you don't have to make, you can make that choice, right? There's 2 options, 3 options, 4 options to do something, and that's up to you. I do think it makes it hard for developers though. And I think like Rails and Django and Laravel, if you're learning those things, when you learn one of those frameworks, you have your answers. You don't have to go do a bunch of research. I actually think, and I've talked to some of the more senior developers that I work with, like it's exhausting to try to keep up with everything in JavaScript because there are so many packages and so many new types of ways to do things. I remember when I first joined the company, I like spun up that form ingestion thing I was talking about earlier, that little like mini site. And our CTO was like, what the hell is Drizzle? Like went and explained to him, like, this is what it is. And he was like, holy shit, I used Prisma like 2 years ago and it's awful. Like, this is really cool. But like, this is a CTO of a good company and he doesn't have the time to go, figure it all out and work through all these things. So yeah, I mean, I like the JavaScript so open. I think that it's really hard to learn as a developer. And I think it's really hard to learn as a developer in JavaScript because there's so much content and there's so many different packages and they all have different APIs and it's really overwhelming to like go learn every single one of them, go learn how Remix does routes, go learn how Hano does routes, like go learn all of the various different APIs of all these different things doing routes. So I feel kind of mixed feelings about it is what I'm trying to say. Like, I like that it's open, but at the same time, I think for like more younger developers, right now is a really overwhelming time to try to build React to JSON applications because there's so many different solutions to do one exact thing.
Just throwing this out there. There is Adonis.js. It is a full-fledged ORM framework thing. It's just like Laravel, but it's so niche that JavaScript developers wouldn't use it. So
yeah, and I think there are people like I know Theo Brown pretty well, like before my time as backend to working in solutions and in engineering, but like T3 Stack's pretty cool. I think like what they do is pretty unique in the fact that you can like, I don't know, I disagree with him a lot on Next.js stuff, and he's partnered with Vercel, so he's incentivized to like talk kindly about them. But it's pretty neat that there's like a CLI package that like out the box, and it has such a community that it can teach you how to do these things. They have their own documentation about Drizzle. They have their own documentation about TRPC and how to build APIs. And so like, in terms of learning, I actually think that's one of the better ways to learn. It's why when I like, after I started learning the basics of React, I went and watched and read about a bunch of watched his videos and read a bunch of their documentation around that, because it was a good way to learn because they had so much info around it. But that is an open source project that it like doesn't really have a commercial reason to exist. Whereas that's not the case with Laravel. That's not the case with Next.js, et cetera.
I just have a suggestion, and this is probably from Brooks, about like remix stacks and stuff like that. Would that be like a good topic for, because it kind of ties into this too?
Yeah, totally. All right, we're gonna wrap up here. Real quick. Thank you for that segue. That was helpful with talk ideas. So we do have a meetup coming up on October, I think 3rd, no, 2nd. So yeah, mark your calendars, first Wednesday of the month. Our next meetup, we already got it up on Meetup this time. Not that. And some various ideas if you're looking for ideas. So Erwins did a good job of following up with some of Michael Jackson's packages. If you want to know what Remix is becoming, that's like actually the best way is to go look at this little package. So it's got a lot of good stuff that's being built there. So yeah, it's not just random packages. We're kind of building to something. So no one's talked about single fetch. That's like a pretty new kind of feature. So if someone ever wants to talk about that, it's a great one. Lazy route discovery, fog of war, it's another pretty easy one that you could probably cover that in about 5 to 10 minutes. If you are more wanting to do like a lightning talk, we just kind of released sort of this one's in a PR, but you can probably find it pretty easily. Our new kind of routing convention that we're working towards, React Router 7, or just general Remix plus whatever, plus Prisma, plus Sanity, plus I don't know, there's a bunch of different ones. And then view transitions. I don't think anyone's ever talked about that. So a bunch of ideas if you're looking for a topic. I gotcha. So just reach out to me online or right now or whatever, and we'll get you up and go for next month. And then I think, yeah, Mark, you want to talk real briefly about? I think I gotcha.
Yeah, so we have a website. It was built, I think, before I even joined. And it hasn't been updated in at least a year, maybe more. And so Seth and I, maybe 4 months ago, decided to just make a new repo for a new website. So we did that, and then following along with that, I created some wireframes for that. So we have these Figma wireframes here. Right now, there's just the homepage, but I think this is enough to get started on. So we have, basically just like a header with some call to actions there. We want to show the like a meetup card. So when you visit the website, you can see when the next meetup is, information about it there. You can view it on Meetup. And then we want to have like the previous talks. We have, recordings and videos of all these talks that go up on YouTube, but it would be cool if they were on the website as well. So this is the beginning. There's some more thoughts over here. I've basically mapped out the information architecture. We want to do things like move this form into the actual website, along with the sign up if you want to present a talk, doing all that through the website, and de-emphasizing the blog portion of the website, because right now the website is mostly a blog and there's one post from 3 years ago. So I think this stuff will be generally more useful to people who visit. So we're looking to get that started. I think Seth created this discussion, and so if you want to help us out with that, that's up on GitHub. We've got a repo for it, new Remix Austin column. So feel free to talk to me, ask me questions about where that's going and what this is.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming. Feel free to stick around if you have any questions to either of our speakers. Definitely hit them up before they head out. If you want to give a talk to me. And thanks HEB for hosting.